And it's my pleasure to introduce Chris Decker from Salescast. He's going to take us through a very top of mind topic for many people, the importance of content and the founder role in that. Chris, thanks so much for joining. Really looking forward to your chat.
Absolutely. I'd like to submit to the audience today that founders need to create content to survive. If you've always wanted to create content, now it's become a need. And this is a founding hot take from Salescast. Thanks for having me here, Gary. Really excited about everything that Breadcrumbs is doing.
Thanks, Chris.
A little bit about myself. I'm CEO of Salescast, and I've helped coach over 170 creators, both individuals and companies, small and large, to start their podcast journey and experience the power of content-led growth. So I'm going to share a few of those findings with you today. My favorite part here is the origin story. In 2019, I noticed that the barrier to entry for branded podcast creation had been dramatically lowered. The creator economy made it very easy to get in. Equipment was a lot cheaper. So I decided to start my own. What I didn't account for was this huge gap in quality creative and accountability. What that means is there was no right way to do it. It was a little bit of the wild, wild west. In my roles as in marketing and sales for organizations of all shapes and sizes, I was starting to note that traditional outreach yields were sparse, whether that was through email, LinkedIn, any kind of other medium. Maybe we would be lucky to get a 1 in 20 reply yes to go to the next stage of the conversation. But I flipped the script. For some reason, what was working exceptionally well was that podcast outreach, leading with value, inviting someone onto a platform to come on as a guest in B2B was exceptionally high. We were getting crazy numbers like 18 in 20. What this meant was I could open doors into all kinds of net new relationships. And what I realized is that net new relationships with constant contact, constant content can accelerate your community. So any community driven business model, which is almost every company emerging after 2010, if you're not embracing community, you're kind of getting left behind. Any community driven business model needs consistent content. And if you're adding net new relationship building, this is a huge driver for growth. And I realized a lot of what was missing, quality, creative, and tech process could be applied. Not many people had come in and done this yet. In short, how can a founder bootstrap their story and apply the lean startup model to their content? And how can that content fuel product? And how can that product fuel revenue? I think a lot of us have probably heard recently this that product-led growth is taking off. But how do you get people exposed to that product? How do you get them to try it? How do you build demand? And that is through story, and it's through iterative storytelling, which means what is the basic unit of that story and how does it evolve over time? We found that iterative storytelling works exceptionally well through podcasting as long form content. Think about it. You can record video and audio simultaneously, high definition, all in the exact same activity. Two, that this omni-channel distribution solves for both audience and community building. What this means is if properly applied, because of the nature of subscribing to a YouTube channel or a podcast feed or any other content method, TikTok, Instagram, your email list, your subscribers, it ultimately builds itself over time as you continue with consistency on omni-channel. Nothing else I've found has truly solved for this kind of cross-platform list building. And then we've noticed that the repetition of communication, of vision and story strengthens your company's resolve over time. You become more confident in the marketplace. You find a voice. You decide to pivot forward with courage because you've received feedback from countless people that are now inside of your community. This applies to fundraising. This applies to sales. This applies to company development. And this results ultimately in a hockey stick in growth. I'm going to keep moving forward. So, what does this look like in practice? How can I truly experience this? I'd like to invite you to think of what exists at the center of whatever you or your company can become the best in the world at. Skill. What can drive the most economic value from that skill? 3, passion. What are you most passionate about? What is the company most passionate about? This applies to both a brand and an individual. At the intersection of those 3 things is a sustainable thing that you can talk about forever and build a story around. It really is that simple if you go through the exercise. Number 2, putting this into practice is simply setting a recording and publishing habit. The number one factor to success. Most podcasts don't make it past the 10th episode. Most net new content habits don't really make it. Companies or individuals try posting, try sharing their story, and they yield results that are nominal. They get crickets back from the audience, so they end up giving up. If you set yourself up for consistency from day one, you know you will fail. You know it will take time. You get into the habit, it will bear fruit and results. And the third thing is to have a community and audience creation vehicle, to have a retention vehicle, inviting people into a Slack group, building an email list, building subscribers, bringing people into a place where now they can be together and all of your content drives into that place. There's a reason for all of your content to exist, is for people to take the next step, to come inside of your walled garden. Instead of donating money to Microsoft via LinkedIn or Mark Zuckerberg via Facebook, you can own your audience. You might as well build that asset. If you put these 3 things into practice, you will experience content-led growth. And so my key takeaway for today, if you didn't get anything, is that your company's MVP, before you even build a product, it doesn't just start with your product. Your company's MVP starts with your story, communicated efficiently with your community. I'll repeat that one more time. Your company's MVP starts with your story, communicated efficiently with your community. Without this, there's almost no reason to build a product. Today's buyer audiences don't just ask for authenticity, they demand authenticity. They're not just asking for authenticity, they demand authenticity. And authenticity, that story, that truth, that iterative storytelling we talked about, your skill, value, and passion, times community, a growth vehicle, and a list building vehicle equals growth. And that has been my hot take.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you so much. Lots of interesting thoughts there. I guess the place I'd like to start is, all kinds of founders out there. Not all of them are natural born storytellers. Like, what's your experience with that? How do you help them create that story? What does that process look like in your mind?
One of the first things that I would encourage someone to think about is to just play with it. Have some fun. Think back to your favorite comic book, your favorite superhero. Think of who was the villain in that situation. And you'll start to understand what your story is if you first understand what you're against. So start out with who you're not Ask yourself, who am I not going to be? Who am I against? Then you start to discover who you are. A part of even this slide format included an origin story. You see, we all communicate in stories, whether or not we're actually actively aware of it. We'll tell friend stories, we'll tell spouses stories, we'll tell stories to our prospects. And we do this inherently naturally. If you're not crafting your story, people are going to craft the story about you. You might as well be a little bit more in control of it, let people see themselves in it. So, starting out with what are you against is one of the most powerful mechanisms for that. The reason why I included passion as a part of that three-part storytelling framework is because I guarantee there's at least one thing in your life that you enjoy talking about. Practice talking about that, and then you will get into the motion. I can train anybody to be a storyteller.
That's interesting. And starting with, I guess I would frame that as starting with like the antagonist is a really interesting approach. The second thing is kind of a more practical thing. Like you really honed in on this idea of creating a habit and habit forming as one of the keys to success. Is that the typically the largest challenge is like making sure that that muscle memory is created and that dedication is there?
Of the thousands of podcast episodes that I've been a part of on either end, the number one factor is consistency. Are you familiar with karate or taekwondo or just with the concept, Gary?
Sure, yeah.
What is the hardest belt to get?
Whatever the first one is would be my guess.
That's correct, the white belt, because most people never ever get started.
Right.
You see, most people are familiar with the black belt and they would say, oh, that's the hardest belt to get. Absolutely not. A black belt is a white belt that stayed consistent.
Okay. That is a very interesting way of putting it, for sure. And then I guess, what's probably on a lot of people's minds, I would assume, is just the ubiquity of content, right? Like in every format. And podcasts are no exception, right? Like there seems to be a new podcast every 10 minutes. How do you help the people that you're working with, the many companies that you're working with, create content that is, I'm going to use the word unique, which is there's a lot of kind of contention around unique content, but I think more important, compelling.
The way to create compelling content is extremely simple. It's almost too simple, but nobody does it. Is to trust your own curiosity and inquiry. The problem is we're looking at everybody else, we're seeing what they're doing, and we think we need to do that, but a little bit different. I disagree. Follow your own curiosity and inquiry. And if you find it interesting, I guarantee another human being finds it interesting too. So it is a matter of self trust. There is content insecurity. Oh, what if I am not this immediately? You won't be. You absolutely will not be. So you have to start with your own curiosity and inquiry, and that will make sure that you do not fail, because you can't fail if you're following your own curiosity and inquiry, because you will continue by the very nature of that forever. It never stops if you are honest with yourself.
Fair enough. Chris, we are perfectly on time, and really want to thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts. Definitely interesting. If folks want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
We have a free community called at salescast.community. You can shoot me a DM, anything that you might want to know. We have some free courses available as well. We are all about giving. If you don't like what you're getting, start giving what you'd like to start getting. So we like to give what we like to get, which is help and being a good human being.
Awesome. Chris, thanks again. Everyone, feel free to reach out to Chris and Colin at Salescast. They do amazing work and obviously have very interesting views on how to create thoughtful, compelling content. Please enjoy your break. We will be back in approximately 5 minutes with Jason Reichel. See you all shortly.